Hello and welcome to Arcane Precision. My name is John, and today we are doing another one of our special episodes, Army Spotlights. And this time we're talking about Orgoth Sea Raiders, and with us we have Akers and Blake. Say hello, guys.
Hey, hey.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's very exciting to have you guys on. You guys are very well known Orgoth players, around the world, and yeah, this should be a fun one. We'll start off with a little bit of an introduction. We'll start with you, Akers. Do you want to introduce yourself? Kind of let people know who you are. I'm
Yeah,
sure a lot of people know, but
sure. I go by Acres. I mean, a lot of guys know me. I get to travel quite often. Do a lot of tournament scene. I've been playing Orgoth since it was released, and I mean they're one of the mains that I ran for. Like I said, since they came out. I mean, it's a great army, great faction. I like the way they look, like the way they play. So I'm excited to talk about them.
awesome. And how long have you been playing?
Oh, I mean, I've been playing since I think middle of Mark II, so not as long as most people think. But obviously out here in the Michigan meta, so we're getting back up and running again, and we're growing, not by leaps and bounds like on the East Coast, but we're definitely getting up there, and we do travel pretty well. So I'm sure you'll see a few more of us, in this year's and next year's tournament scene.
Awesome. All right, how about you, Blake?
My name's Blake Balake in certain circles. Um, I have been playing since the game came out. Early Mark 1. I was one of the OGs. I played Crix and still own the army for the first 3 editions of the game. But with the pretty drastic changes in fourth, in the Mark IV, I decided to pick up a new army, and because I have been scarred from ever playing Signar during my 3 editions of fighting them as Crix, I decided to go with the Sea Raiders. I still bounce between the Sea Raiders and the new Crix, Necrofactorium, but they're both a lot of fun, and for different reasons. I'm up in the northern New England meta. I'm in New Hampshire, get down to Massachusetts pretty often with Captain Con's not too far away from me. We're our locals are sort of a small meta, but we've got a pretty dedicated play base, and I do get to some of the more major events out on the greater East Coast.
Very nice. You get to play against JVM pretty often. I'm guessing.
Yeah, we're about an hour apart from each other, so it's enough to have that level of challenge in my backyard or his backyard, depending on who you talk to.
All right, let's get some questions going. We'll start off with basically what draws you normally to play an army, and obviously in this case it's going to be Orgoth. So we'll start with you, Blake.
Besides the wanting to be sort of an early adopter thing, my history with Crix in the prior 3 editions was generally Crix was known to be a fast and hard hitting but fairly fragile army. So I wanted an army that could ideally play in the opposite style from that. And although Orgoth is very flexible and can play a few different ways, the slower, more bricky take hits rather than deal the first hit style is definitely something that attracted me to them as a change in play style, while still maintaining that capacity for stacking debuffs and overwhelming power that kept me in love with Crix for the first however long, 15 years of the game that I played prior to Mark IV.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. I've done that throughout. time where I'll get bored of a certain play style and be like, oh well, I want to try something else. So that makes a lot of sense. How about you, Akers?
So for me, I went with kind of the opposite approach, obviously, of Blake. I stayed kind of within my own playstyle. I know that I like kind of slow, grindy attrition style, games. And I again played Scorn competitively for years, through inception of Mark II all the way through Mark III. And then when Mark IV hit, I was kind of looking for an army to kind of fill that same uh, kind of gap for me. And looking at Orgoth and all and their rules and their aesthetic, like I really liked all the spiky bits and they're very very edgy faction. And like I said, I kind of like I've always said that if I'm not drawing blood while assembling models, it's the army's not for me. So I've always been
Nice.
I've always been drawn to the sharp edges and the spiky tones and all that stuff. So like I enjoyed the look of them, but also like they kind of fit within how I enjoy playing the game. So that was my main draw.
They do seem like the Chaos Space Marines of War Machine. All the spiky bits and
Yeah, I didn't really mention it before, but aesthetics is a thing for me too. Maybe you've already guessed, but I've never played a just humans army. It's always been monsters, undead, or assorted other abominations.
okay, cool.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I've always been a root for the bad guy kind of player. So I've always played evil factions and always like trying to and make the bad guys win basically.
Nice, nice. All right, let's get into the next segment. We're gonna talk about the strength and weaknesses of Sea Raiders. So whoever wants to start first, you want to start first, Akers?
All right, so strength and weaknesses of Orgoth, I would say you're looking at solid strength of Orgoth is clearly its melee capabilities. They've got a lot of power wrapped up with the core of Axers, Nashers, even the heavies are all they hit very hard, very accurate. A lot of the damage output is melee centric. Also, they're a very good counterpunch faction. They're kind of built upon that. I'm going to take the first punch, be survivable enough to do so, and then hit you back disproportionately to kind of equal that playing field. So they are very forgiving, or they can be very forgiving in that way as well. So if you do make a mistake, sometimes your armor values or your overall sturdiness can just save you in some regards. And the to me the one of the big glaring weaknesses of Orgoth is their almost their universal like lack of Pathfinder. It's it's obviously they have some tools with like the Forge Master and then the Tyrant. But if you run into certain casters that have inhospitable ground or just ways of generating rough terrain, it's very hard for Orgoth to kind of weed through some of the terrain aspects of the game because they are for the most part a relatively slower faction in relationship to a lot of the other Mark IV armies, where you only have maybe one or two models that can go that exceptional speed of like the 15 to 17-inch mark. So you're almost always going to be getting hit first, and weeding through terrain also just inhibits that even more of that glaring weakness of being a little slower to the fight than you'd want to be. So you're always a race to the middle of the table, and usually who gets there first is in the commanding position, and that's almost never Orgoth.
Mm, that makes sense. Would you say it's almost similar to what Protector of Meneth was in previous editions?
I mean, Menoth by and large.
Not as army style, but as far as like they
Yeah.
they always struggled with Pathfinder, so that
Yeah,
was
I would say it's very similar in that vein. Where, like I said, I never played the faction, but I do remember them by and large being pretty Jack focused as well. And like I said, I'm sure Blake will speak to more
that's true.
of the battle group armies because, like I said, he's more battle group leaning than I am. I'm usually the battle group minimalist, and he's usually more of the jacks and shoot him up and beat him up that way. So I'm sure he'll talk more about that.
Okay, well, we'll head on over to Blake.
Yeah,
And
I can segue into that. Just to continue on the strengths and weaknesses, I think another strength of Orgoth is that although their melee, their melee power has been spoken of, I think that they are a fairly flexible army. In that there are a bunch of different viable play styles that you can play with them. Of course, the resilient and hard hitting play style, the one built to take the first punch, has already been discussed. But, if you wanted to build a shootier army or one that does get the alpha strike, there are certain casters and options that allow you to do that effectively as well. I think another weakness of Orgoth, sort of in that vein, is that although their playstyles are flexible, they are a bit lacking in certain tools that I think other armies take for granted more. The thing I'm thinking of most is spray attacks, because they have very few good spray weapons. You know, certainly we're not living in the age of the Orgoth Sky Bomber dominance anymore, and even then, that's technically a mercenary, so that barely counted as it was. And ways to ignore stealth is restricted to a rack spell in Second Sight, and the Garlgast as well has a few other very limited options. I suppose I'll add one more strength and one more weakness. Strength in their rack spells. We have a lot of army racks now to, pick apart, and I think Orgoth has one of the best in the game, even after the 2025 Windstorm nerf. Carnage, Second Sight, Silence of Death, Inviolable Resolve, Windstorm still being useful. Sometimes Hex Blast if if you want to play an offensive caster. I think it's a wide variety of and Redline. I neglecting Redline even. I think it's a wide variety of excellent spells that is kind of a good problem to have when you compare to other spell racks that you typically see the same 1, 2, or 3 in most games. And I suppose one other weakness I would consider of Orgoth is that while their stats are good, they are more of an elite army. And, whether or not you're taking the single wound reavers or the tougher infantry or a lot of the jacks, there isn't really a whole lot in the army that feels like an undercosted bargain in a lot of ways, the way that certain other armies have. There's not really any equivalent of like Necrofactorium sludge thralls or, the cheap heavies that you can build in Winter Core or Storm Legion. I think there might be an exception to that in the Jackals, because those can be extremely efficient. But I think that's another general weakness of they are quality, but you are paying for it.
Yeah, that all sounds pretty reasonable. Would you guys call Orgoth like an honest army? As far as like, really good stats, but nothing that's too crazy, like out of nowhere, you didn't see it coming. What do you guys think about that?
Just to go first here, I feel like every Orgoth caster has. It's mostly honest as far as model design goes. In fact, that the individual models are very simply built and highly purpose built. But I think each of the casters have at least one dirty trick that can definitely you can pull out of your back pocket to surprise with an assassination. With Horus, it's often Thunderstrike related. With Kishtar, sometimes her Field Marshal Swift Hunter just lets you get Jack. If you thought you were safe at 0.1 inch out of her shooting range, that's instantly a rude awakening. Sabreth has Spammable Perdition, and her Berserk Overtake stuff, which is good. And then, Butcher and Oriax have their own tools. Maybe not Oriax so much, but yeah, I'd say an honest army, but with some dishonest casters.
Yeah, basically honest, appearing to be honest, but not really. I've definitely I've been on the receiving end of a Thunderstrike assassination because I got too cute, got too close to him. Maybe we can move on and we'll go to the next topic here. Let's talk about, say someone is getting into Sea Raiders and then they want to start playing. Maybe let's give them a little bit of a guidance of purchases, standout units and solos and stuff like that. Sort of like introduce someone new to the army. All right, we'll start with Akers.
Yeah. I would say, if you're looking to get into Orgoth, like the big things you're gonna play in most lists you play, Axers are the main like workhorses of pretty much any Orgoth list that are kind of the foundation. And then you've also got, like I said, we've already kind of alluded to a little bit. We might talk more about them later on, but Jackals are also incredibly good. They're well-costed models. All their weapons are very diverse. They are just, again, like a solid workhorse model that you can get a lot of value out of, and they're very versatile. You can say with the hunter rifle options range, you've got bloodthirst and pole arms for set defense and shields, and there's a lot of good configurations with that model that can go a long way with. Most of the stuff that's in because I'm not very familiar with obviously what the new box configurations are, but the stuff that used to come in the original run of like the expansion box, like the Nashers, the Axers, the Rock Harriers, like all of those things are going to be injected right into, I would say, 90% of the list you play. Again, coming from the infantry kind of forward armies that I play, I reach to those quite often and have a lot of success with them. The Reavers, you can, like I said, I would say the Assault Reavers are probably better than more so the Assault Reavers are better more so than the Skirmishers or the Strike Reavers, but again, those still have places in some lists. It's just kind of your seasoning to taste on with those on what you want. But and then right now there's a lot of success. I'm sure I'll leave it for Blake. He's kind of the one that headlined the Garlgas, but it's been very effective this year. And it's been kind of the model that's filled the void of the Sky Bomber once that got put back in line, which we all know needed to at some point. It was going to happen. That model was living on borrowed time. But the Garlgas is also has been a surprising standout for me this year. How well that's performed.
Okay, so yeah, it sounds like Orgoth seems at least competitively to lean on the beefier units.
Oh yeah, I mean their playstyle kind of lends itself, like we said, to be that survivable, sticky, hard hitting, hard to remove kind of thing. But especially with, like I said, I'm sure we'll talk about him more at length later on. But yeah, with Harusk, that's kind of like his meat and potatoes. Is like just make stuff really tanky and very consistent.
So just sort of to continue on that, and as Eric just said, I'm sure we'll get to Harusk soon enough here. But I would absolutely recommend him as a starter caster because aside from his obvious strength, he is easily the most forgiving caster in Orgoth, and probably one of the most forgiving in the game, given his personal suite of options, his toughness, and his reliability. As far as speaking to a new player wanting to get into Sea Raiders, I was actually just looking up how Steamforge is repackaging the boxes while you were talking. So it does seem like the auxiliary expansion, one or two of those are probably a great way to go. They include the Axers, which are good. The Harriers are good. The Barragers are quite good as well. And it's got the Volcar Forge Master, which I think the Volcar and the Reaver Commander haven't been mentioned yet, but they are definitely the unsung heroes of Orgoth, and they really make the army hum in a lot of ways, as such that I would consider probably those two solos to be arguably the most essential part of most Orgoth armies. The Garlgast is certainly strong. I wouldn't necessarily consider him, essential or a first pickup, but he's very good. At the Reavers are more specialty units. I do like them sometimes. I do agree that the Assault Reavers are probably the most generally applicable of the 3 Reaver subtypes. And then there's the Cursebound army, which is, well, the Cursebound command box, which is sort of hit and miss. I do like the Nashers. They're mostly the same as Axers. They hit harder, a bit shorter range, a little more expensive. And I personally like Raveners, but I think that's another play style difference between Akers and I. But I wouldn't necessarily have that one high up on the list. I would easily say 2 auxiliary boxes first, probably a core expansion with some extra purchases for possibly extra Reaver Commanders and extra Witches, and then a couple battle group boxes. I don't necessarily see the need to max out on tyrants. I rarely see lists with more than like 2 of them anymore, just because they are very expensive. And of course, I do love jackals. So I have made lists with 4 jackals before, and I'll do it again.
Nice. All right, I think that gives people a little bit of an idea. So yeah, let's jump on to the casters. We'll talk about them briefly and their play styles. We'll probably talk most about Horus because he is the elephant in the room, as we like to call it. He's the most played caster in the army by far. So yeah, let's start with him. Blake, do you want to give a little outline of the caster? We don't have to talk about stats. Just sort of like how he plays. What does he like? Stuff like that.
All right. Well, talking about Horus specifically, he generally just makes everything in your army more reliable. Both in terms of keeping them on the table with his feat, as well as Fate Blessed, a good control range, and very strong personal combat capabilities, as well as Blood Boon and Vanish, which both encourages you to get in there to use those abilities and allows you to retreat and make yourself safer. His army style definitely likes the tougher elements of Orgoth, stuff whose toughness that can be augmented with his feat the best. If the elements are tough, that's a bonus because the feat prevents knockdown. So it just gives you 5-up ward save, to use the old Warhammer parlance, against most things. And he also likes, more powerful, even lower quantity, high impact attacks, because those attacks are give you more impact on using his Fate Blessed rerolls to make sure that they hit or reroll low spikes on damage.
You wanted to add anything to that, Akers?
A whole lot. I mean, Blake did a pretty good job of covering most of her Rusk. I think like he's just like I said, he's kind of the thing holding up the entire faction, which is basically a good and also a bad thing. Just because you can't really move forward because everything has to be checked against him because he is that reliable and kind of makes everything just better around him because of his personal kit and his own not only his personal output but like you said, Fate Blessed is a hugely important ability when you have an elite army like this, where that you missing 2 or 3 attacks out of a 6 attack unit is can really be the difference a lot of times of removing a model or not. And that consistency is what really makes him kind of a cut above a lot of the other Orgoth casters.
Oh, that makes sense. So we'll get into a little more about what makes Orisk the preferred caster and maybe what could change in the future to sort of incentivize people from taking just him. So what do we think? Akers, you want to give your opinion on that? Like what's going on there? Why are people playing him the most, and then sort of the off list doesn't get played as much, or sometimes not even at all.
Yeah, I can say like so as kind of Blake alluded to earlier, he is a very forgiving caster, where even if you are playing him and you're still fairly new to the army or just in general you make a mistake, he is a caster that again allows you to reroll to make that I need this hard 8 that if I get 2 or 3 chances at it with the reroll from the commander plus Fate Blessed rule, it makes it very reliable for that to happen. So a lot of those where you only get that one chance amplifies it. That's very likely that whatever that key roll you need to succeed is going to succeed. But also he is a very good just late game cleanup piece when a lot of your army is gone and been removed from the table. He's also just capable of killing heavies and casters alike, and anything that really goes up against him. He is has enough personal output to really clean up and kind of bully a lot of end game scenarios. So, and like I said, he's just very versatile. He's kind of what makes the whole army kind of click. You can build him jack heavy, you can build him infantry heavy, and there's a lot of different ways you can play him. Right now it's the flavor is obviously him with the Garlgast and just throwing models up in there and feeding and daring your opponent to interact with you. But yeah, even before that, you were running heavies and these giant meat mountain bricks that your opponent just couldn't break. Where I'm not saying that that's a easier play style to kind of run through, and it's a lot. It's his strengths are very in your face and apparent, where some of the other casters we'll talk about, they're a little more niche and their skill level is a little higher to play those casters and play them well, where Harusk is very versatile, but his game plan is also very straightforward.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you have anything else to add, Blake?
I mean, I think Akers covered most of the why of Horisk in a highly detailed and understandable way. I guess all I would really add here is that Horisk is kind of a known quantity and has been since he was one of the very first casters of Mark IV, and so the fact that some 2.5, I don't know how long it's been, 2.5 years or so later since Mark IV came out, and he's still definitely leading the pack in a big way with a 60+% win rate on Longshanks, just shows that he is just a question caster, and not every army can bring the answer to what he brings. You know, sometimes he just wins the game randomly by toughing out an unusual number of attacks, or sneaking into Thunderstrike kill, or just getting in there with his powerful personal close combat threat range at the end. And he has many different win conditions for his game plan, even if the opponent is able to counter it. And he kind of asserts them all at once. And more often than not, one of those gets through. And that's what makes him strong.
So, I guess my question would be like, do we think this is a problem, or is it just, it's just how it is? And in order to have a caster that's that good, all the other ones, would suffer because they're just not going to be as played. What do we think about that?
Well, I will say that if I was put in charge of nerfing Horusk in a way that would be a real nerf, but also make him, I think, fair, it would have to be something to do with Fate Blessed. He has a lot of powerful tools and excellent reasons to play him, but for me, Fate Blessed is what puts him over the top of just making everything better unconditionally in a way that makes a lot of the other Orgoth and caster rack choices in the army kind of redundant, because Horus can just do that as reliably with a more universally applicable feat and a stronger personal body that's difficult to assassinate.
Oh, okay. I don't necessarily think that Horus being that strong is a problem at all. Like, I think it's cool when you have a caster in the army that's, he's sort of a bad, and like you said, wins games for you single-handedly sometimes. I don't find that as a problem. It just seems.
I don't consider a powerful caster to be a problem. My issue with him is I think Horus steps on too many toes in terms of the other options and casters Orgoth can bring, and I think Fate Blessed is the reason. I'd love to see him be like the super, the super tough guy, keep his super tough guy niche, keep his Thunderstrike and personal combat tricks, but let some of the other casters be better at, buffing accuracy or army damage in the way that Horus kind of lets you cheat on by just re-rolling the rolls you don't like.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. So talking about the other casters, let's say Horus does get nerfed. Who do we think would step up in that that second role, or replace him as the first role? Do we have any preferences of a second caster? Let's start with you, Akers.
The Orgoth stable of casters after Horusk drops off. I wouldn't say considerably, but it definitely is a significant drop off from. And I do really like Sabrith. I think she is still very powerful. The issue that I think Sabrith runs into is the scenario packet. A lot of what she wants to do is you want to alpha hard, really strike fast and try to win on her feet turn typically. And she's not really the grindy attrition style caster that Horusk is. So the scenario packet kind of doesn't lend itself well to that style of play, just because you're able to. You don't have the I win if I'm 5 or more CPs over my opponent. I auto win the game. There's that seesaw effect, which she potentially loses more material than you would like. Just too fast. But she is still, I think, very strong, very powerful. She's in a lot of secondary lists. I see her played as second fiddle to Horusk, And the only reason why I think not played more is because she's kind of one of those casters that I talked about earlier that her while many Orgoth players know she's strong, it takes a lot of reps and a lot of investment of time to play her and to play her well, because she has a lot of avenues of play. She is, very flexible, and there's a lot of moving parts, typically to her list. So it's one of those casters that's not really, you're not gonna be able to take right out of the box and play her at a high skill level, because she is a very micromanage intensive caster to play, but also very rewarding to play once you do get her down.
Okay, yeah, that's a very interesting point. There seems to be a lot of casters out there and other armies that are good, but it's just the scenario packet doesn't lend them to be their most successful selves, I guess. So is there any we'll talk about the other casters. I know you guys mentioned Oriax and Kishtar. I can't remember who was playing who. But if you want to start, Blake, pick one of those two and talk a little bit about it.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna pick Kishtar of those two, but I will have to
Okay,
chide you
yep.
for leaving out my boy Orsis, which I'm sure we'll get to.
We'll talk about him. Yeah, I know.
Okay.
He's cool.
But as far as Kishtar goes, I think that she's, generally, I think she's a candidate with Sabrith in which, if something happened to Horisk, she could step up as a caster main potentially. She's been through a few different incarnations. Previously, she's been sort of all in as a battle group shooty caster for better and usually for worse. But her current incarnation has a more broad breadth of models she works with now that her feat basically affects all friendly faction models, and Surefoot is just a good, strong general use buff. Such that I think she's got some interesting things going on with her. I'll echo Akers' comments about the scenario packet, of which, she does tend to skew a little more shooty, at least as far as her kit is concerned, and pure gun lines aren't really very strong right now between the scenario packet and some of the tools that are available to counter them. Orgoth does have a few ways around that. I'm just going to shout out to the hunter heads on the tyrant, because they can be a big difference on scenarios like trench warfare, or the duck and cover card, which might otherwise stymie a lot of good shooting lists. But Kishtar is another one that is going to be more difficult to just play out of the box without a number of reps, because she is very fragile. She's a 15-15 caster, and she has not that much focus, and she likes to spend it between her upkeeps, her fire group, and just making her ranged attacks where she can. So, I think she's got potential, but it does take a lot of time to learn how not to get her killed. And, it's not a deal breaker. We have Bodon and Jake's running around with similar stat lines, so crazier things have happened. But yeah, I think that she's good, but she also has issues that make her riskier to play.
Yeah, I did notice that her kit, at least to my opinion, became more interesting. But that's a good point about the whole how she wants to play in the scenario packet. All right, so Akers, did you want to talk about Oriax?
Yeah, I'll leave Butcher for Blake. I mean, he's so close to being something that's unique and interesting, and I think we'll kind of touch on that a little bit potentially too with Butcher. But he's right there where like he just needs maybe a couple extra small nudges to put him in a step where, because like Starcross we all know is a very strong ability. I was super excited when I saw that obviously on his kit. Just when the bulk of your models are kind of def 11 to 13, between def 11 and 13, Starcross isn't as powerful, especially now with like many Mark IV armies having hit fixing either built into the lists or as rackable options. Starcross is not as powerful as it used to be in previous editions. The other thing is he doesn't really have a strong comeback mechanic. So if you do get behind, his feat is not really a damage amplifying feat. His kit really isn't really about getting back in the game if you fall behind. So you kind of have to play very just kind of tight with him. And if a mistake is made, it's also very hard for you to correct that during the course of the game. And again, he's also, one of those in the same vein as it's a very killable caster. He's very fragile as well. So he's a caster that needs to like kind of be in the midline in order to affect models with Starcrossed and also with his soul abilities of placing models with the pseudo slipstream, things of that, but also has a hard time surviving there just because of his stat line. But so like I said, I think he is definitely a caster that I'm hoping for that gets another look at in January, and if he gets a few positive nudges, can easily get to a place where I think that Kishtar is right now. That could be a compelling option for next year.
Okay. Yeah, I do sense a trend of a second list for Horusca doesn't have a lot of staying power as far as like scenario or attrition. And maybe something like that could be done when they do a little bit of a change up in January. And that leads us to talk about our boy, the Butcher. Maybe he could be something. I know right now he's not that, but maybe he could be something like that in the future. So what do we think? Okay. So you do think there's something there right now?
I do.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I will say Butcher is interesting because he's very much a win big or lose it all caster. He does have some very specific design elements that are going to lead to certain army weaknesses. For example, the inability to cast a racked windstorm because of spell, not sacred ward, and all of his spells being offensive, which is not normally a huge issue, but can be difficult, especially into an army like Old Umbre, where all the primevals are sacred warded, make it more difficult to exert a strong threat range. And Butcher is one of those casters where he is designed to get in there personally. Like, I don't think you're really going to get the most out of him unless you learn how to play him where he gets in there. And of course, committing your caster is generally inherently risky. But to the opposite end of that, sometimes Butcher can win games on his own. I've seen it. I've done it. He has some very interesting parts of his kit that I think can be very strong into a significant part of the meta. For example, his feat being a control area, remove everything from play for a round when they're destroyed, is actually pretty excellent against Necrofactorium because it just shuts down their recursion mechanics completely. And I also think that a lot of the new stuff, both the currently released in terms of, the likes of Aberration and Nostilla, as well as the upcoming Graveborn stuff, which we've seen, both have some excellent tools that enhance his own game plan and that he enhances in turn. His threat range Hunter's Mark, his threat range buff Hunter's Mark doesn't care whether or not you're faction, so it can be used to improve the threat ranges of the likes of Aberration or Invictus. And I think the the Graveborn cadre having a lot of great, available shield guard models, stuff that also independently benefits from Hunter's Mark. And in case of the Revenant Champion, another excellent model to just drop back onto the board with his feet, are all things that could certainly improve his stock in the now and the near future.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Let's see. Do we have any other points on casters, or I think this could be a good segue into talking about the new releases. So yeah, you were mentioning how some of the new releases could help some of the casters. You have some other ones out there that could affect casters, or I know you mentioned you had gotten a couple games in with the new stuff.
Yes, I played a couple of games with. I've actually been using the whole cadre with Kishtar so far. I think there are some specific things that the cadre brings along with, to Kishtar's kit in terms of an Archibald disintegration off of Anathea. Definitely helps kill things at range in a lot of ways with Kishtar. And the Revenant Champion, besides another shield guard, Kishtar loves just the no knockdown effect of shield guard. It helps keep her a lot safer. But just speaking about the cadre more generally, I think they definitely bring in some extra strengths that augment Orgoth's general, basically take the first hit idea, because the cadre itself is very slow generally, but it's extremely resilient. It has some cool utility elements in things like Thunderbolt and Disintegration. The cadre itself, if you use the whole thing, just adds 3 extra shield guards to the army just by being there, and everything when the lines clash, especially Anathea's battle group, herself personally included, can be pretty tough. The execrators are the toughest things in our crowded Orgoth 8-point 3-man unit suite, and the Revenant Champion is just a tough, slow little idiot that helps. That's basically the Groton Keeper, but cheaper and arguably better at the job. And of course, Butcher can bring it back because it's only got a 40 mil base, which is a unique aspect. Butcher also kind of likes guard dog. Surprise, surprise.
Oh, yep. Yeah, I'm playing Kador back in the day. I definitely like having guard dog as a rule for Butcher or Sorsha. Yeah. So what do you think about the new releases, Akers?
Yeah, so I am actually really the new character unit, the execrators. Like, I think they're going to be incredibly useful in a wide variety of lists. Like we talked about, like the Thunderbolt is huge for Orgoth. We talked about before, they're all relatively slow. You're usually the second one to the scenario elements because you're going to be outpaced by a lot of armies. And beat back weapons from jackals has always been very good, just removing models that you can't necessarily kill off of objectives, similar to like the same vein as Harusk with Thunderstrike, just kind of clearing out those models. And now that you have a character unit that can effectively do anywhere from 3 to 6 of those attacks, because they have Snapfire as well on the spears, and we haven't even talked about the fact that all of their weapons are also magical and blessed, which magical obviously is in Orgoth is pretty common. They're not lacking magic weapons, but there are not many. The only other unit is the Reader Skirmishers that are naturally blessed. So that's also something that's very prevalent in this cadre as well. There's a lot of weapons that are just blessed, so you can get around a lot of those pesky buff spells from your opponent, and really get to dig deep. And the fact that they're also undead, which helps you into a wider variety of armies that try to can exploit Orgoth for souls, because we don't have a way as a faction to protect our souls from enemy models. So being able to field a more undead elements can potentially make some of those matchups a little easier for you as well. With being able to supplement your army with more undead models.
I just want to jump in a little bit about the execrators. Akers, you were absolutely right that magic weapons in Orgoth aren't uncommon, but magic range weapons in Orgoth are definitely more so. Usually, if you want magic guns, you've got to have Therian or the Blessing card for Sigil of Power. So the fact that the execrators bring their own magic throwing spears is unique. And I just want to give a shout out to Accursed Armor, because not only does it effectively give them unyielding against living models at a bare minimum, but you can just there's so many applications for what it triggers. Like if something else gets hit nearby and one of the models gets tagged with an AoE, that's a weaken. Actually, the last game I played, I was against Chimera, and Nixian hit them with an Arced Hunter's Mark, and I'm like, okay, Nixian gets a weaken. So that ability has a lot of different applications, and also highlights the strength that Akers already said, in that they're undead, and so they're immune to that sort of shenanigan.
Yeah, I noticed that they're also they're also very chunky boys, so it adds to the strength of the army. So yeah, let's. I know you both play Horus, and you have different ways to go about it. So as far as like building a list for Horus, what do we Akers, if you want to jump in and kind of give us what you normally would take.
So you can, like I said, we talked about obviously wide varieties of ways to play him. Typically, I lean again pretty infantry focused, so I am typically taking max axers, which is the 2 units. Normally, I really like barragers in this packet as well, and Blake's kind of won me over with them. Like we've went back and forth about them. I was not impressed for the longest time. Like I kind of went more tyrant heavy earlier in the packet with guns, and then obviously when the Sky Bomber came out, that was kind of the preferred gun platform in Orgoth. And now that that's been gone, the Garlgast and the barragers have kind of taken up that mantle of the gun in that list, because you kind of really want that element to keep your opponent honest, like something that can kind of reach into the backfield and take out some support models and just kind of make your opponent a little uncomfortable, because by and large most of the Harusk list is very slow and tanky, so being able to like kind of dig deep and scalpel out some of those models is a big plus.
Cool. And as far as like the new unit, their execrators, what do you think that's going to be replacing, or is it going into one of your Horus lists?
Oh yeah, it definitely goes into the Horus list. I mean, it's another effectively like armor stack on top of your already your feet. So now the first time one of them gets hit, like I said, you're dropping their melee damage. Well, living models, anyways, they're dropping their melee output as well and stacking on top of feet, and also in the same vein, making it easier for you to kill them on the return, because it also drops their defense with weaken. And like I said, their kit is just kind of tailor made for Harusk with the Thunderbolt. So now you're not going to have to use that great slam as much anymore, because you'll be able to manipulate your opponent's models with those, while also making them very reliable with the Fate Blessed, if that does stay as it is. I'm curious to see, if I have not played Anathia and the Baragul with Harusk yet. I don't know if they're necessarily going to have a place there, but there could be something there with them, because you have now 2 modules that are kind of that module gets to be independent of Harusk, so while also still benefiting from Fate Blessed, but it's also not going to be as much of a tax on Harusk running that battle group. And with Hellrot on the Barrel Ghoul potentially, and maybe if you run a Tyrant with Invulnerable Resolve on it, you're getting now two pretty tanky elements that your opponent's only going to be able to deal with probably one of them with obviously the Blessed card to get around the armor buff. So the other whoever one inevitably gets to live is going to be much harder to kill in subsequent turns. So that could be interesting. And like I said, I do think that the Revenant champion will be really good with Rusk too. It's just obviously that 4-point model for 4 points and with Rusk is a very competitive slot where you have Therian at that point. You talked about obviously the Reaver Commander and also the Forge Master. All those solos are very necessary for that list. So like competing with all of those is going to be hard to find a spot for him, but I think he will be a interesting choice in augmenting what Harusk gets to do, because now he can play a bit more aggressively and actually apply more of that damage earlier than what he normally does in the game.
Oh, cool. All right, how about you, Blake? What are we looking at as far as your typical Horus list?
Well, I think most successful Horus lists are going to have two elements. One, the tanky, tough base of it. And that could come in a number of different ways. Of course, all of the all-core models, Nashers included, certainly fit into that. It can come in battle group ways. I think this, cohort models, the Garlgast et al. Can provide that. And the new cadre, all of the Graveborn, are also, I think, all tough enough to provide that element as well. I think the second element that you need, because Harusk, his melee elements just generally aren't hitting first. They're medium speed at best. Harusk has no threat range buffs, and the general army-wide lack of Pathfinder is something that needs to be considered as well. So the second element is some element that forces your opponent to close the lines, which is usually going to be a shooty element. Up to this point, I think in 2025, the Garlgast and Barragers have been a big part of that. And I think that with the Graveborn stuff, I think the Execrators are going to be a pretty significant part of that as well. Not only for their ability to just personally output things, but for if they go up first and they use their Thunderbolt shots to push away some enemy big models that are actually capable of breaking your armor, that buys more space for the rest of your army to advance without necessarily being counterpunched by your opponent's hardest hitting things on your feet turn, which creates more difficult options. I mean, the Execrators can be counterpunched themselves most likely, but they're tougher than the rest and they've done their job. I actually have a test list with some of the new stuff that includes 3 Jackals with hunting rifles, actually, as that sort of convince you to come in sort of element to force enemy engagement. And it does include Anathea and her battle group, both as an excellent counterpunch element, and because the option for disintegration increases the output of support fire from the Execrators, the Barragers, and the Jackals I just mentioned, especially because those are all pretty high impact shots that get more out of Fate Blessed, coming back to that, which actually threatens to remove heavies from a considerable distance without forcing the opponent to engage with you, which is exactly what Harusk wants.
Very interesting. I like that idea about having some firepower to sort of soften the blow before your enemy comes in. So let's talk. We did miss talking about merc options for the army. We'll do it very quickly. As I know prior the bomber was a big one, and then I believe I've seen Malgreth used here and there. What are other? I know the bomber's not commonly used anymore, but what are other mercs that you guys have been adding into your armies, if any at all?
I can go very quick on this. Eilish is a sometimes guy. He's mostly just there for Puppet Master, and the reason being that Puppet Master can go on your warjacks where combat coordination from the Reaver commanders can't. So it can be useful for a highly consequential shot, like say a harpoon from a tyrant, if you're using them with Kishtar or Sabreth to get a critical drag. Um, Malgreth is certainly common enough because with the removal of the savagery card, he's a good, reliable way of getting entropic force, which is actually really important for things like the mirror, or stuff like foul blood or the Trichomerex. Although, because Anathea also brings entropic force, we'll see how popular he continues to remain after they're out. Um, Damian Korovnik, he's only for Butcher, really. He can spell save Hunter's Mark. That's kind of his job. I mean, he can put Blizzard on Kishtar to give her stealth too, so that I've used that before, but I've never really found it too worth it. And yeah, I don't think the balloons are really. I have played around with a Sky Bomber on Sabrith because she actually can help his accuracy, which is its big disadvantage right now. And Crippling Grasp can stack with Crater, so that can occasionally be powerful. But yeah, they are not usually bringing their points back around these days. And of course, Aberration and Invictus, I think both of them have some play with Butcher because they get the benefit of Hunter's Mark. And I think a shout out to Nostilla and Aberration. Nostilla in particular, I think brings a lot that Butcher likes. Revive on Rocks is excellent. And Dark Seduction can make a huge difference in setting up a murder conga line for Butcher that can allow him to, start soloing an opponent's army.
Okay, so there seems to be some tools there that could help Butcher in the merc department. Anything else to add, Akers?
No, I mean I think Blake covered the merc options. Like I said, Orgoth, in my opinion, is kind of more of a purist army. They're not really. Many of the merc options are always kind of like a sometimes choice, and they're more like meta and tool based, more so than like I need this because I don't have it. Like I said, like a Mulgreth, like a Krovnik. So just things that you need to kind of help fill out a list more so than like the mainstay place that I'm always taking.
They're more of a salt and pepper to taste portion of the army.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I think we can move on to the next section. This is where we talk about how to play and how to play against Orgoth Sea Raiders. And we'll start with how to play and just kind of a broad overview of some tips on how to basically become a better player. Some things that people might not see that could help get better. We'll start with you, Akers.
Sure. So playing Orgoth is a lot of it's all about just being patient and attrition, and it's all about trading models. Like, because you're never really going to beat anyone with raw stats. You're never gonna, out threat them, and it's all about just you're needing to make good conscious decisions on what model takes what. I have to make sure that my models are in the scenario, and they are a very scenario driven army where you're needing your opponent to have to commit to you. And one way you can do that, as we talked about before, is using a couple of those gun elements to encourage your opponent to attack you and close those lines, or to get on the scenario and try to score points and then force your opponent to play on your terms because you're able to kind of hold the line, hold the objectives, and force an overcommittal that way. So, and you can do so by, again, I'm surprised we haven't even, and I'm looking back, and we haven't even brought this model up yet in Orgoth, but it's probably one of the most tilting models that most people play against is the Groton Keeper. That model is kind of the epitome of what Orgoth is. A slower, very tanky model, very hard to kill, and just by putting those up on scenario, you're not giving away much by putting a model there, but also it's going to take a lot more damage. It's going to be a lot more disproportional to what your opponent has to commit to remove that model to what you're basically going to be getting for that model dying. And if they don't, then you're able to kind of, like I said, claim the objectives, get up on scenario, and just kind of grind it out that way. So you definitely need to be very patient and methodical with Orgoth for sure.
Right. It sounds like people keep calling it rocket tag. That's the way we play now. And it's about how much does your opponent need to do to remove what you've presented, and if they overcommit or if they undercommit, and then that's to your advantage. So it sounds like playing with that would lend to make someone a better player.
Mm-hmm.
What other tips and tricks would you say to give out to a player that's looking to get better at the game, Blake?
Well, I would say, I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail regarding Eric's talking about patience. I think that is important regardless of what caster you're playing. For Horus, it's making sure that even though the opponent is eventually going to engage you and probably out-threat you, you're basically setting the terms of the engagement, and that might mean holding on to your feet and waiting to exert scenario pressure until the proper time, and I think all the other Orgoth casters have variants of that. With Sabreth, it's knowing when to play the rocket tag, because she can absolutely do those things. For Kishtar, it's knowing how to cheat trades, which she can very much do between her range extension and her reposition guns that she brings, both at her battle group and the barragers, without just losing on scenario. And, with something like Butcher, it's when to commit him. And so I think it's going to come down to experience with, when to do these things. But I think for a newer player, the advice I would give is always keep the scenario in mind. Orgoth are very often not going to be, doing huge alpha strikes. Sabreth is an exception, but she can't benefit her whole army. She gets one or two elements at a time for that. So generally speaking, you're going to be playing sort of scenario zone defense, and whether or not it's aggressively encroaching on the scenario and defining how your opponent engages with you, like with the Horus game plan, or trying to kill enemy stuff without losing material on your own, while also figuring out how to not lose on scenario, which is more of a Kishtar strategy. But either way, Orgoth is a very scenario-focused army, and how you interact with the scenario profitably, given the capabilities of your army, is going to separate a good Orgoth player from a great one.
Anything else to add, or can we move on to how to fight Orgoth? Which is it's a head scratching thing for a lot of us. Basically, from my point of view, it's normally either bottom of 2, top of 3, and then Horus feats. And what do you do? I It's simple, but it's very effective. And I've hit my head against that brick many, many times, and sometimes I figure it out, but most times I don't. So, what do you guys got? You want to take it away, Akers?
Sure. We've talked about a couple of the weaknesses, obviously, of the army, and trying to exploit those is kind of going to go a long way, right? So like but we have Windstorm, obviously, so the range defense is somewhat there with obviously the shield guards from Keepers and Jackals, but Windstorm is not what it used to be. So being able to shoot with guns and kind of pick off and eliminate models that Orgoth, like we talked about, is a very elite army. So being able to kill, 1 to 2 actors in a unit still goes a long way. I mean, you have a little bit of recursion with Aetherian Vanak with Grim Returns, but just being able to kind of sandpaper and keep them at arm's length as long as you can is what you want to do. Like engaging with them in a melee where typically Orgoth excels. So you want to kind of either have an army that is incredibly fast and can put pressure on Harusk to feet earlier than he wants, or have something as well that's incredibly resilient that you're able to kind of also counterfeit his feet, and you may not get a whole lot of work done on Harusk's feet turn, but he's not going to get a whole lot of work done against you either. So you can kind of blunt that advantage you would have with one of your own, like a Vargas or something, along that nature. But guns are typically still pretty universally good into Orgoth. Like I said, with the limited shield guards we have, and you have to play. Except if you force the Orc to rack Windstorm, it's going to feel a little bad for you, but it's not something that most of the casters want to have to cast over multiple turns, because that really obviously hinders their toolkit, especially instead of if Haruska's casting that, then you're effectively taking away 3 of his somewhere else, which can be like we talked about with an elite army, can be the difference of that heavy living or not. If you have a couple rolling hiccups, so it's just it's using your speed, using your mobility to your advantage, forcing them to spread out and sandpaper and stay away from them as long as you can, and then kind of go in for the death blow once once you've kind of sufficient armor.
You mentioned some element of shooting is usually helpful. What do you got for us, Blake?
Well, I mean, I agree with the stuff Akers said in terms of Harusk can rack Windstorm for shooting defense, but he'd really rather not, especially because most games he'll be casting it on the first turn, and then the second turn is probably a feat turn. That'll be the way in most, but not all games. And then, after that, there's probably not enough on the table for things to matter all that much in terms of Windstorm. So forcing him to take that spell is definitely a win there. I would say target priority is a big deal. Recognizing that point for point, the all-core models are going to be the most damaging elements of the list. The Garlgast is big and scary and, demands engagement, and ditto tyrants if you go that way. But it's not going to be the model that puts in the offensive work. So if you're able to sort of skirt past that and, take out some of the Axers or Nashers before they get to attack, with bearing in mind that that's not always going to be possible, that is a huge step toward fighting the attrition battle if it comes to that. And then I would say Orgoth actually has a pretty good drag sub-theme between the Spiderhead on the Garlgast, the Siege Tarrasque, and Tyrant Harpoons. So, models that are sturdy or shield guards that can prevent that are useful tools there. And the last thing I would say is do not forget about Thunderstrike ever. There have been a lot of games where an opponent has gotten into has aggressively spent Focus or Fury to try to make headway, make headway into Horosk's feet and done some significant damage, but then left left a model within 2 inches of their caster that could be targeted with a slam, and then the caster gets slammed into, and the other elements of the army shoot the knockdown caster to death. So you always keep that out in mind, because that ends more games than you think. Especially because a commitment into Horus means he's usually going to be able to cast it for free off of Blood Boon.
Yeah, I've definitely been the victim of that. I was playing Baronova and I feeded, and all is good until there's a little bit of a gap where where Thunderstrike can get me, and it sure did. Right. So as far as other things to fight Orgoth, I guess my other question would be, when you're doing your list selection and you're fighting against, obviously we're for the most part we're gonna see Horosk. What's a big oh no, don't drop this list against that?
For my part, I have found that my Horosk, to the extent that he struggles most into a lot of Necrofactorium lists. Those are kind of lists that can pack enough power to actually break Horosk's armor in the feet turn. They're the army that potentially has the most to gain from Horosk's typical build being a more living focused army, between their soul collection abilities and mortal fear off the Furies. And because of the innate revival ability of Necrofactorium through Grim Returns and such, they actually have the capacity to outpower Orgoth on melee attrition, which is typically something that Orgoth excels into.
Interesting. So usually when that happens, you're not dropping Horosk, or?
Not usually. I mean, I feel like actually Kishtar could, or not Kishtar. I feel like Horosk versus Kythos could actually be a pretty fair game, because Horosk does help a lot with the accuracy issues that are that Kythos is trying to leverage there. But something like Decathis or Eviscerus could potentially be a bigger problem for Horosk, and it's something that I would want to leverage my off list for.
Okay. All right. So on the other end, what would you say, Akers, is maybe advice to give your opponent if they have this list? Don't drop that against you.
So you're looking at what lists that are that Orgoth excels into? You're talking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, basically.
Well, like I said, given that the most Orgoth is still pretty good into other living armies as well. So like with the snacking from obviously Axers, you've got Blood Drinker from the Nashers and whatnot. So they do excel at in the melee prowess, but also they can heal themselves off of killing a bunch of infantry models as well, living infantry models. So keeping living infantry away from a lot of their melee helps a lot too. So it goes a long way. If you have done attritional work on Axers, the last thing you want them to do is to get infantry, snack 2 or 3 models and be relatively back to full health again. After you've done all that work, getting them down to those 1 or 2 boxes. So that definitely goes a long way to to do that, and you're also going to want to stay away from lists that typically don't allow you to punch through, obviously, Harusk's feet and the rough armor stack, because most of his army is pretty vulnerable after the feet turn. Because, like I said, the Axers top out at armor 18, Nashers are armor 17. Even the Garlgas is only 18 base after feet turn. So if you're able to weather the feat, but you also need to have a game plan to deal with Harusk's army on his feet turn, and if you can't, then you're kind of at the mercy of that feat. So if you're able to at least maybe not kill models, but manipulate them, and in the same turn, if you can't remove those models and you can't manipulate those models by slamming them, by beating them back, by taking them off the scenario, then you're going to want to look at a list that potentially has those elements that can kind of at least mitigate some of that game plan and kind of force the other drop, where, whether that be Kishtar, Sabrith, something like that. If you're able to get the Orgoth player off of Harusk, you're probably playing at least now in a more advantageous game for you, because I'm sure that Orgoth player probably has played, maybe, as we kind of talked about, John, all you play against is Harusk, and all most Orgoth players play as Harusk, so they're not going to be as savvy with that offcaster if they're forced to play it, and they may not be as comfortable in that game.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So basically, you want some punching power in your list to drop against Horusk, and that makes sense.
Yeah, punching power is definitely a plus, but I would say more so than anything, the versatility of being able to manipulate your opponent's models is huge. Like I said, we talked about in the Stone Aberration, being able to Dark Seduction and walk that Siege Tarrasque outside of Mortal Fear range. So now you have effectively an extra +2 damage now that against those models, because now you don't have to deal with Mortal Fear anymore, because that Tarrasque is kind of gone. Or just like the beatback tools, the slam tools. Like, you may not be able to knock them down, but being able to manipulate your opponent's models will be more beneficial in the long term than just having that raw hit model with hammer type list.
That's pretty cool. Every time I hear about Nostilla, all the interactions that you can have, there's going to be some interesting games out there coming up, for sure.
Oh yeah, that model is very good, and it's got a lot of versatility.
Yeah, she'll definitely be in a few places. I mean, certainly I'm using her. I mentioned her with Butcher already. Fortunately, I don't think she's going to be as ubiquitous as original release Big Pig, for a number of reasons, which is probably a good place for a model.
I agree. Yeah, we don't want Nostilla and Aberration Parade. Right. So yeah, let's. If you guys are good, we're gonna kind of wrap it up. And give you guys a chance to plug anything you want, and maybe tell us what you're excited about. In the coming few months. So yeah, we'll start with you, Blake.
Well, I don't really have anything to plug. I'll just leave that to Akers. But as far as stuff I'm excited about, I mean, certainly the Graveborn won't actually be physically out until November, which is a little sad because I won't get to bring them to WTC. But I am looking forward to experimenting with them. The January update, model rebalancing is always a fun one. Even though even though it might not contain good news for Horus, I'm optimistic that it will contain some good news for other Orgoth models that could possibly use a touch up. And then, of course, down the line at some point, I'm not sure how much I can talk about this because it was a leak that we shouldn't have seen, but I appreciate a certain metal bird for Orgoth somewhere in the future.
Ooh, that sounds exciting. All right. Yeah. How about you, Akers?
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty open. So I'll be at Nova this month in August, the end of August. So that's going to be a good time if you guys make it out there. Andy and Erica put on a great con, great people. Now, I'm not just saying that because they're on my WTC team, but they are. It's a great event. I'll be out there. We definitely can schmooze and whatnot. And I love, like I said, obviously love talking about the game. But and going into that, like I said, I'm surprised that Blake didn't mention. But yeah, like we are both going to Sweden this year. We're on WTC teams, so
Yeah.
Blake's on team one. I'm on team two, so we'll both be over there repping for USA and taking on the Euros. So that's always a great time. So I'm excited for that. All the games and reps we've put in this year for that. So October can't come soon enough.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it should be. This is actually only going to be my second WTC, so it's like the first one I kind of had some jitters about it. I'm feeling more comfortable with it now.
That's good. I'll definitely be rooting for you guys, and root for all the USA teams. Yeah, it should be fun. And hopefully I'll get to watch some streamed games and see maybe one of you guys playing a game. So as far as like Nova goes, I would love to go to Nova, but working at a school, and we're doing cleaning for summer. That's like crunch time for us, so it's usually not a good time for me to go to a convention. But it does sound like a lot of fun, and yeah, I mean I've gone to Sussy Scuff before, so I know what a good show Erica and Andy put. So
yeah,
that should be.
I've been to Nova before. I can't make it this year just because of days off between Sweden and a couple of personal vacations earlier this year. But I can certainly, as having been to the Boker Brawl, I can attest to some of the great events that the folks on the East Coast put up. It's just awesome standard of quality, and I always look forward to getting together with the people in the community and playing games live.
All right, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for chatting with me about Orgoth. I always love to learn new things about the game. I'm not good at the game, but I love to study the game and maybe get a little bit better in the future. Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having us.
All right. Bye, everybody.